So if you follow what I'm doing exactly and then do it for 3 years, you will make these as good as me. It's a really healthy way to live your life. You just aim only for perfection and beat yourself up whenever you don't attain that. Hi guys, welcome to an episode of Liz Bakes For You. I'm Liz, and today I'm making you my vegan raised donuts. Now you may be thinking, I don't like vegan stuff, I'm not vegan. However, I promise you that this is by far one of the best vegan donut recipes in the entire universe because I've tested a lot of them. And this one in particular, I've tested multiple times in multiple iterations. These are raised donuts. They are light, they will melt in your mouth, and as you can see, you can do so many different combinations and flavors on these. It's really just a fun project, so let's get started. I have made this recipe a bunch of times, and there have been a bunch of iterations of it, and I swear that this is the best one, and you can tell because on the sheet where I wrote the recipe, I crossed out this one that was trash, and I crossed out that one that was trash, and then this teeny tiny one that has small edits on it, that one's the winner. Pretty simple recipe. Everything's just gonna go in a stand mixer. It's gonna mix up for 10 minutes at the very least. But let's talk about the ingredients that are going into this. So, we have dry ingredients and our wet ingredients. In the dry ingredients, we're using a bread flour, which is a high protein flour. I'm going with King Arthur because I like it more than other kinds of flour. And there's also some granulated sugar, some yeast, and some salt. I really like to cut as many corners as I possibly can and get better results in less time. So instant dry yeast is my go-to. And then to the wet ingredients. Pretty standard also. I try and make it really easy because I've tried a lot of different wet ingredients in the vegan dough to basically give this dough flavor. Because that's the biggest issue in this. You're not adding eggs, you're not adding butter, you're not getting the natural flavors that are coming from those. So what I use is water, which not very flavorful, I get it. However, I tried milks. I don't really think they create as good of a texture inside the donut. Water really works best for me. And then I use vegan shortening. Today I'm using a spectrum shortening. I prefer Nutiva, and it also has like a fun color, so it's a little bit yellow and it makes your dough look a little bit more like happy. I don't know. Vegan doughs look a little sad sometimes because they just look like. And then there's also going to be a little bit of vanilla extract and a little bit of applesauce. Now those last two elements I would never add in another type of dough, but those are the two that I'm hoping are creating a more complex flavor within this dough. The one thing I will note is mixing this together, extremely easy, letting it rise, letting it roll out, all very easy. The one moment where you're going to need to be a little bit careful is basically not overproofing them at the very end and getting them into the fryer from whatever pan you're rising them on, but I will definitely show you how to do that. All right, let's go. So, dry ingredients in the bowl. Wet ingredients. Wow, that's awesome. All right, so we're starting this on low just to get everything incorporated, and then we'll move it up to about medium. Oh, I should put the timer. One thing I've noticed about the vegan dough is it takes a little bit longer to come together than I think the other doughs do. I'm not sure why that is, but I usually have to mix it longer. So what we're looking for is gluten structure here. Now the best test you can do is you get a little piece, this is a pretty big piece, but little enough, and you hold it up to the light, and if you can see light through it, and if you come over here, you can see light through it. Oh no. Okay, so this is the dough that you have, and usually they tell you clean out the bowl, oil it, put it back in, cover it. I am, again, extremely lazy. I'm going to leave it right in this bowl because a lot of, there's really nothing left in here. It might stick a little when you're flopping it out, but that's no big deal. So we're just gonna cover this in plastic wrap. There's not really anywhere super warm in the house, so I'm just gonna put it by the oven and maybe osmosis, it'll warm up. We are back with our vegan donut dough. It is all risen and it's ready to be rolled out and take on its second rise where it will become donuts. When we dump this out, roll it out, and cut the donuts, all the donuts we cut from that first rollout will look amazing. And then every time after that, as you're knocking more and more air out of the dough, they'll need a longer rise and they'll be a little bit bumpier. So ideally, you put your first rise on one tray, and then you put the second roll out of the, like once you bring the dough back together, roll it out again, you put those on a separate tray because they're just gonna need a little bit longer to basically take that air back on that you're knocking out of it from that first, from like rolling out this dough 2 times. This is my handy dandy tray that I basically have made almost every single donut on for Orlando since it started. It was a purchase by my mother, probably from a Macy's with a coupon. It creates a little tent with a slight, not a tight seal, but a slight seal over it. And what this is going to do is it's going to create humidity. I don't know if you've heard of the greenhouse effect, but I think that could be maybe what's happening here, probably not. But why do we need that? Well, donuts need humidity to rise correctly, or else you're going to get a crust, basically, on the top of whatever donut you're rising. And then when it hits the fryer, you're not going to get that second rise that you want. And that's important because that second little burst of rise right as it's frying is what gives it that fun little cute ring around the outside. And anybody who makes donuts that don't have that, if they're me, I call myself trash for doing that. When you're rolling donuts out, what you don't want to do is put too much flour down because it's just going to get caught inside the dough and create these little flour pockets. It's just not great. Okay, so we're ready to get this rolled out. We have a very lightly floured surface, and I have a spatula, one of 2 that I brought with me. And we're just going to very gently encourage this out. Now you'll see that it's pretty good about just all coming out. What you don't want to do is mess with this too much. You just want to bring it back together into a ball. When I'm at this stage, what I like to do is similar to like a sourdough move. You kind of bring these over on themselves, and then I flip them over, and I just slowly coax it into kind of sealing that dough up on the bottom. And the reason you don't just immediately roll this out, the reason why you manipulate it back into a ball like this, is because what you're going to end up happening is whatever structure started building in that first rise is just going to continue the way that it was. And you want to basically manipulate it back into this ball so you can kind of control the way it rises the second time. So the one thing about the vegan dough is it doesn't necessarily come as great back together as like the brioche will. So when I get here, I usually just give it a little pinch, and this is good. It's good to go. This is when I throw a good amount of flour down, a little on top. And we're gonna roll this out. If you're making miniature donuts, you want it a little thinner than what I'm gonna do. And if you're like me, you love a miniature donut. But this dough likes to spring back a lot, so it'll take a few rotations, just rotating the dough, making sure you're hitting it from different angles. So this is about the thickness that I'm looking for. It's probably gonna make some pretty big donuts. This rises a lot. Like these get pretty big, actually. Now that I've mentioned that, maybe I'll make them bigger. Okay, so now that you have your dough all rolled out, as long as you've mixed it properly, rolled it out properly, this is the part where you're gonna punch out your donuts. I have a mixed set of donut punchers, which basically give me the ability to create different sizes. So I'm going to I'm going to get pretty close to the edge because I want to get as many out of this as I can. As I said, the second batch will be a little bit, once I roll them out again, they're not as cute, and I want cute donuts. So now I'm just cutting out the centers, which, pro tip, if you want to make this into a donut hole that doesn't just become a really long cylinder, you have to bring this back in together as like a ball. So usually at the shop I worked at, they take a donut hole and they roll it like this. And I know that looks really ugly and it's probably going to take a while to rise back up, but this will give you a more circular donut hole. All right, so we're going to put these on our tray. We're going to have them do their second rise. We're going to roll out the rest of this dough and also share the same tray because I'm limited on what I can do. And then we'll be back to fry these up once they're ready, and I'll give you some tips on what to look for when you're wondering if the donuts are ready to be fried. We are back with our vegan raised donuts. And we just got through the most intimidating part of the process, I would say, which is the rising process. Now, you may be wondering, I still don't know what I'm doing and I would like some tips, please. And I'm here to help. These are my approved donuts. So this is after their second rise. These are ready to go in the fryer. And one thing that you can immediately notice about donuts when they're ready to be fried with this recipe is a little jiggle. Give it a little jiggle. I don't know why, but it works with this one, it works with my brioche recipe, and it is a little trick that I learned from PB Donuts in Providence. They have like a massive jiggle on their donuts when they're ready, and you just make like a blah 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 noise with it. It makes it really funny. And now that I've also seen that, there's one other trick that you can look for. If you're not seeing this, maybe you're rising them at room temperature. I rose them in a slightly warmed oven. So if you're rising them at room temperature, they might not be as jiggly, but what you can do is you can get down, very lightly press it, and what you're going to see is it's going to spring back, but it's going to leave the smallest little indentation still. And that's how you know they're ready to go. If that springs back all the way, they're not ready. What happens if you fry a donut that isn't ready to fry? Well, you're going to have a really compact donut. It's going to be dense, and you're not going to get the same sort of like airy, melty, breadiness that you would like. Will it still taste good? Probably, because it's a fried piece of dough that you're covering in sugar, so there's like very little chance that it's not going to be tasty. What if you're rising your donuts and you notice that they have just exploded and they look crazy? This has happened to me before. Sometimes you can salvage it. The very best way to do it is to take scissors and cut around these little pieces of parchment paper that I put on the pan and flip them into the hot oil. But when you're working with 375-degree oil, it may not be ideal. You might just have to scrap the batch or roll them out again, because you can plop them back down, roll it back out, cut them again, and let them rise again and try again. So this was always the problem that I had with my donuts. I never mixed the dough enough, and when it came to like rising them properly, I never did that correctly, and they would always fall flat. So I would say that that is always a problem with overproofing whenever something collapses, and that is a problem if you are in Florida that you probably will have more likely than underproofing, just because of the heat and humidity that we have there. So we're going to get these in the fryer. We're going to fry them for 1 minute on each side. And I'm currently heating up the oil in this. Normally I would fry it in like a more shallow cast iron pan. This is what I have to work with. The tools I'm going to need are a thermometer to make sure that I'm not putting donuts in an oil that's too cold or too hot. One thing to keep an eye on is when you turn your oil on to high to get it heated up, make sure you drop it down a bit once you get frying, because if it stays on high, you're basically going to heat that oil up more and more and more until you are like breathing in a lot of smoke and thinking like, am I lighting my house on fire right now? And you might be. The other thing is chopsticks. These are very useful extended thingies, and you can flip your donuts with them. I always feel like Pusheen when I work with these. Alright, and the last thing you're going to want to have ready before you start frying is a pan with a cooling rack on it. Because when you pull these donuts out, sometimes you can put them right on a paper towel if you want to do that, similar to like, well, it's similar to how I cook bacon. I don't know if that's how everyone else cooks bacon. But if you have this, it's really nice to have it right here, right next to it, so you can grab the donuts out and put them here. And it basically gives, because it's on the wire rack, it's going to give it some space to dry off. Get these wet donuts out of here. It's going to give it time, it's going to give it space to cool off, because these are going to be very hot inside. You just fried them at 300 and something degrees. You want them to cool off a little bit before you're decorating them, because they actually will probably be too hot to even really touch when they come out of the fryer, unless you're my mother and you can't help yourself and you need to eat one immediately. Corn oil is one of those. So I use corn oil. A lot of places use peanut oil. A lot of donut shops in particular will use like a shortening, either solid or liquid shortening. Now this is just like a standard candy thermometer. You want to make sure it goes up to, I think these go up to like 500 degrees or something. There's like a meat thermometer, but those don't go up high enough. 342. Oh, sorry, 242. One last thing before we fry, which is probably the 30th thing before we fry that I've said. When you go to grab these donuts, you want to use your hands, obviously, but you want to be very gentle. I know it doesn't like, this isn't the type of thing where like, I'm just gonna grab it and throw it in there, but it's worth saying that when you go to grab them, you want to use a lot of support on the outside and your fingers on the inside. Gently pick it up and then gently place it in the oil. So let's come on over here and start frying. Okay. Gently pick it up. Ooh. Now you can see how some of my fingies are already making marks, which is not ideal, but it's not a big deal. No one will notice it. So you can kind of see on the edges how it's getting that last little rise, which is my favorite part, because it's cute. And you don't want to overcrowd the donuts. You want to make sure they have room to move around because they are going to expand a little bit. So 3 is good. I can't believe I used to do this for hours. I'll just stand here. Okay, I'm gonna flip them now. When you go to flip, you're gonna use these guys. You're gonna grab one, pop them under it, and gently toss them over. You can get the other guy involved in there if you want, but usually you can maneuver it with just one, and that allows you to stay far enough away from the oil so you're not getting like burned. Do you ever just randomly get the electric slide in your head? Did you have that experience as an elementary school student? That was my PE class one time. Let's pull these out. So I got some of I got a little bit of line there. And what I like to do is flip them back over and let them rest back, basically the same way that they rose, because that is what's going to look cute, in my opinion. You get a flatter area on the other side. Some of those got lines. We're doing okay. It's only made 9 donuts, which is probably pretty good. We're back with our fried donuts. They just got out of the fryer. They look okay. First time I make donuts in a different place, the vegan ones in particular. I want to coat a few of these in the sugar that I made, which I did a little bit of cinnamon and a little bit of coriander. I was about to say cardamom. And while these are still hot and a little bit oily, I'm just gonna toss it in the sugar. And I like to, I like to cover it in sugar. However you want to get there. I'm not going to tell you how to do this because I don't know how you like to do things. Maybe you have a different technique. But as you can see, when it's still nice and hot from the fryer, all the sugar is going to stick a lot better. I know some people love to toss a donut in powdered sugar. I always think it kind of looks like garbage because it basically sits and the oil saturates into it, and not a fan. However, go for it if it's your thing. Let's make some vanilla glaze. Pretty easy. Powdered sugar, water, vanilla extract, tiny whisk. Pretty simple recipe when you're using a scale because you just need one bowl and you toss it all in. I'm only trying to decorate 5 donuts with this, so I'm going to make a smaller batch. I'm gonna put 250 grams of sugar in here. The bowl might be too small, so I'm going to try to put 250 grams of sugar in here. I'm gonna do 125 grams of sugar, which is a quarter of a recipe. I'm gonna give you guys the recipe for a full batch, which should do about 10 donuts. But what I'm able to fit in this teeny tiny little bowl is a quarter of a recipe. Next thing is room temperature water. You don't want to use hot water because what's going to happen is that it's going to cool down very quickly, and what happens is it then forms sort of a shell, which you will get with room temperature water on the donuts eventually. But what you don't want is hot water in your glaze, because it's going to create that shell immediately, and then when you go to dip, no glaze is going to stick on the donut. So when you can, room temperature water. I'm trying to do, we're gonna go 20 grams of water. And last little thing, vanilla extract. You can use fake vanilla extract, I don't care. This is the only one Fancy Whole Foods had, so I'm gonna do 1 gram of this. I know a little more than that, that doesn't look like enough. Okay, say 1 gram. Now we take this, and we mix it. Do you like to come in close for a little tiny whisk action? So, this is actually my favorite glaze, vanilla. Because if you're making a good donut, you shouldn't need to put like a ton of different flavors on it. Now, do I get won over by some weird flavors at donut shops that I want to try? Yeah, of course I do. In general, I love a vanilla donut because it is actually the best one. I know there are people out there being like, what about chocolate? I like a chocolate old-fashioned donut. I like a vanilla glazed raised donut. Once this is all mixed up, it will look probably a little thicker than you're thinking it should be. Trust, okay? So when you're dipping donuts, you can, if you don't like to get dirty, you probably shouldn't be making this at all. Take a spoon and spoon it over the top. You can put it in a piping bag and pipe it over the top. I literally just did them. So when you're dipping it in this glaze, there's always a slight jiggle that you want to do. There's a lot of jiggling in donuts. And then when you want to get it back up, you also do a little jiggle. And you do a little flick of the wrist, and then it'll come out. And what I'm hoping will happen, this donut's still a little hot, is that this glaze will run down the side. But if you're ever like, that didn't run down the side the way I want it, I just paint on the glaze with my finger. And this is also why you hope everyone in the food industry knows how to properly wash their hands, just food safety code. Okay, so jiggle it in there, and then it's gonna feel kind of stuck. So you wanna jiggle it back out, and gently pull it. And then you can kind of make the glaze do what you want by doing that. Thank you guys so much for joining me today while I made some vegan raised donuts. I actually really hope you try this one at home because it is one of my favorite recipes I've ever created. And I want you to experience a really good vegan donut and a really good just donut. You'll see that I kind of went a little crazy. I made one other glaze here, which is like a birthday cake glaze. I am really looking forward to showing you guys more of the glaze recipes throughout the videos that we create because I'll obviously be showing you some more donuts. Thanks again, and please comment with any questions and like and subscribe if you want to. I wish I could eat one of these, but I'm taking them to people. I think I'm getting way better at this by the second.